Hello, Internet, and welcome to this week's edition of 1 Minute Answers from 1 Minute Economics, an edition dedicated to worst case scenarios. And first of all, I'd like to apologize for not publishing videos on the channel as frequently, but until everything is 100% finalized with the launch of my new book, I'm probably only going to be able to publish videos, let's say, once or twice per week. And speaking of book launch, I most definitely do need your help, so if you can and haven't by now, please give me 1 minute of your time by heading over to 1minuteeconomics.com and reading my message where I've explained what it is you can do to help. I promise it's very simple, but it would be tremendously awesome if I know I can count on your support. That being stated, I don't want to move on to the two questions I have lined up for today before picking the topic for next week, and the topic for next week is going to be Bitcoin versus alternative cryptocurrencies. Now, over the past, let's say, week or so, Bitcoin has performed relatively well, whereas alternative cryptocurrencies have underperformed. Therefore, I think it makes sense to dedicate an edition of this show to covering whichever questions you guys might have about Bitcoin, about the difference between Bitcoin and the various alternatives that are out there, and so on. If you have a question, post a comment below, and I will do my best to answer next week. For today's first question, Just a Human would like to know if it's even possible to ban the internet anymore if we end up dealing with, let's say, a martial law situation or something along those lines. And a quick answer to your question would be that yes, it would be possible to ban the internet, whether we're talking about banning the internet as in implementing a huge firewall like they have over in China and basically restricting people's access to lots and lots and lots of websites, or whether we're talking about banning the internet as in actually restricting people's access to the internet in general, kind of like plugging it off. These things are possible, and even more so, I'll go so far as to assume that pretty much all governments have plans in place for scenarios which would revolve around the necessity of having to ban the internet, as you put it. So, logistically speaking, yes, it would be possible. It would be hard to do it, of course, but it would most definitely be possible. However, okay, is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? In my opinion, no. Because just like electricity, a case can be made that the internet is at this point, plain and simple, ubiquitous. In other words, we just expect it to be there. It's not like electricity at this point, but we're getting there. In that, okay, if you enter a room, you're probably accustomed to the idea of simply assuming that there's going to be a switch in that room that enables you to turn on the light. It's ubiquitous. You expect it to be there. The same principle is valid when it comes to the internet, and our economy is so dependent on the internet. The well-functioning of the various systems we have in place nowadays is so dependent on the internet that it's highly unlikely that the authorities will choose to do something as dramatic as banning the internet. It's not impossible. There may very well be scenarios in which they're going to assume that it's the only choice they have, but I'm going to stick to my opinion and say that while it is possible, it's highly unlikely. Question number 2 is a good follow-up to question 1, and I'm asked what I think would happen if the internet were to actually be banned. Now, this strongly depends on where you live, because, for example, here in Romania, we have relatives that live in, various villages. They raise chicken, they have cows, they have sheep, they are involved in various agriculture-related activities. So if something as dramatic as the banning of the internet were to take place, the people in question would not, notice it in an earth-shattering manner, in that, for better or worse, it would be pretty much business as usual as far as they're concerned. On the opposite end of the spectrum, if you're someone like myself who earns a living on the internet, who depends on the internet for his various projects, then naturally it would be insanely disruptive if, for whatever reasons, I would lose access to the internet. So that would be the personal dimension. And of course, it all depends on your specific situation. Now, when it comes to society as a whole, as mentioned in my answer to the previous question, it's so hard to imagine what could happen for the simple reason that we depend so much on the internet functioning. Whether we're talking about communication between various institutions, whether we're talking about how things work when it comes to the economy in general and how dependent we are on the internet when it comes to supply related things, when it comes to just conducting business, generally speaking. It would, in my opinion, and I'm just speculating, of course, it's nothing more than a guess, it would be a paradigm that's pretty close to the idea of us entering the proverbial dark ages, in that our day-to-day existence, as a whole, speaking of societies here, our day-to-day existence would be altered in such a meaningful manner, and the variables of the equation would be changed so dramatically then that we could equate something like that to humanity moving towards dark ages, or in other words, an extended period of time characterized by the degradation of our lives, characterized by more or less a step back when it comes to pretty much all areas of life. So while individually speaking, some people are going to cope with the banning of the internet better than others, when it comes to society as a whole, wow, it would be awful. That's it for today, guys. Thanks a lot for tuning in to yet another edition of 1 Minute Answers from 1 Minute Economics. And remember, the launch of my new book is getting very close. So if you can, I'd really appreciate it if you could give me 1 minute of your time by heading over to 1minuteeconomics.com and reading my message about what you can do to help. 2, the topic for next week is Bitcoin versus Bitcoin alternatives. So if you have a question about Bitcoin, about altcoins, about the differences between Bitcoin and the various alternatives that are out there, simply ask me by writing a comment below and I will do my best to answer next week. As always, please like my videos, be active in the community, comment, and if you haven't by now, subscribe to 1 Minute Economics.